We are going to talk tonight about anger. And this is something that I think is very common to all of our kiddos, all of us. So it's something everybody's going to experience or has experienced. To me, it's complicated. It's not simple. And so I'm going to just share with you some information based on research, but I feel like there's so much out there and it doesn't work with every kid, you know, and so I might tell you some things that are great and they may work great with some of the kiddos and then not work at all with the other ones. So I wish there was a, one-way system that would solve all of our problems. At least that's the kind of parent I am. So if you guys know what I'm talking about, that would be really nice. But what I did is printed out some handouts for you. This one is just off the Foster Parent College. So this is with Dr. Delaney. And there's a couple of things that I really liked about what he did. And the first page talks about how he likes to break anger issues into a pie. So an ABC pie. And I do really like that. Sometimes you've heard it called a cycle or a trigger or things like that. But the way he does it is he says that there's always an antecedent. There's biases that we have to take into consideration. And then there's consequences. So even though we're trying to figure out why our child gets so angry, how we can help them make better choices on how to handle the anger, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't still follow through and implement consequence. I think some of us get a little frustrated because we think, with our trauma kids that we have to work so much on figuring out the whys and where it's coming from and parenting them in different ways because of their history that we think that we feel helpless because we don't think we can do the consequences, but the consequences can still be there. We just may need to implement different ones or in a different way. So if you look at the first part, we'll talk about antecedents. So antecedents may be really obvious and they may not be. And I think sometimes even if we had asked, some other people who may observe our kids, that might be helpful. If you have a friend or a family member that you really trust, or even your spouse or your partner, sometimes the antecedent is us, sort of, not entirely, but it can be us. We can be like a catalyst. And so if you have somebody you can trust and you can ask them what they see, and you can take the criticism and try to correct that and kind of analyze yourself, and say, is my approach wrong? Is my tone wrong? Could I say things differently? Am I presenting something that causes them to escalate quicker? So it's not an easy process to analyze ourselves, obviously, but I would highly suggest that as one of the things to do. Another thing would be trying to note their triggers. Now, sometimes antecedents occur right before an escalation, and sometimes they don't. So figuring out the triggers is difficult too. It could be that they had an awful day at school, and you get them home and they just are kind of slowly brewing and stewing, and you have no idea what happened at school. So that could be something that you'll need to look at their environment and their day and the things that happened to them. Another thing is remembering our basics. So hunger. That's one that we should try to avoid at all times. I mean, everybody gets hungry, but we don't want them to get too hungry. If you notice a child that really doesn't handle their hunger well, and they seem to let themselves get completely low before they just kind of lose it, then maybe carrying around some snacks. And we brought Slim Jims, so we were just using that as a suggestion. Something you can stick in your purse, in the car, in a backpack, and not that we want to reward bad behavior with food, but if you do think that that might be part of the problem, you can say, hey, would you like something to eat? And if they're escalating, they may, frown and cross their arms and totally refuse it. But maybe set it beside them, and so they might go ahead and try to pick that up and eat it, Another thing is thirst. We don't think of that often, but, that's another thing. Maybe they just need a big drink of water, and they're just dysregulated because of their body's a little off Remind yourself to give them multivitamins. Of course, we have to use the non-prescription form, make sure we get approval, but multivitamins can be important. We see a lot of suggestions from our physicians and our therapists for omega-3 in our trauma kids, and sensory training I was just in recommended magnesium as well. I would ask the physician first and make sure, but I don't know if you can get a child's dose of magnesium. I haven't checked into that, but it was just a
you can put it liquid in a bath. Sorry.
Liquid in the bath. You can Epsom salts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just straight magnesium?
Both.
Okay. So that brings me to my next thing, and these are all things when we're still looking at the antecedent. Again, I'm not saying that every time your child explodes, you develop a system where you feel like you're rewarding them by giving them something they want. I'm just trying to figure out how can we avoid some of the escalations. So then what about if they're overtired? You know, if you know they've had a couple of days of bad sleep, and we all know that just because they didn't sleep last night doesn't mean we're going to see that today. That might be the next day, right? So keep in mind how that accumulates. And if you know that they are really behind on their sleep, you know, you might just parent a little bit more cautiously for a few days and just try to really understand where they're coming from and how we feel when we're really grumpy and, you know, biting everybody's heads off. So another idea would be, we talk about sensory environments. In foster care, we talk about this a lot, but remind yourself to have structure and consistency. And that's for many reasons we know, but it also helps with them handling their emotions. So if they can, you know, have the same bedtime every night and get up the same time every morning, if they can predict their environment, predict their schedule to a certain degree, you know, those kind of things can avoid escalation. I just lost the word, is transitions a trigger? For a lot of our kids, transitions are a trigger. It doesn't matter what kind of transition, doesn't matter where, they just don't do well moving from one thing to the next thing. So just keeping in and identifying those things. Also emotions. So if they're really sad, they're really frustrated, I already mentioned a bad day, we can teach them to verbalize those things and start to name those feelings. And, you know, I notice, it seems like, you know, and then fill the blank in, they may deny those feelings, but at least you're giving words to what you've observed. And then maybe if they are feeling something else, they'll correct you and get better at being able to verbalize. Could be fear, that's another one, and it could be disappointment. Some of our children are just very sensitive, so. And then the other thing I didn't mention under thirst is sometimes warm tea. I like to recommend that a lot. Again, if we're not sure about the kinds of herbal teas, you know, we can get that on the non-prescription if you guys are, you know, being careful with what you're giving them. But there are several teas that kids can have that can be calming, can be energizing, you know, just can feel good to them. A warm bath, a warm shower, a happy corner, a weighted blanket, massage with lotion, all those things could be helpful to desensitize the trigger or the antecedent that started the problem. Smells can be another thing. We forget that a lot. So that's a really hard thing for a child to tell us, because I don't even know if some children can verbalize that whatever they just smelt really sent them over the edge and they don't know why. It could be associated with something really bad, you know, that happened to them. Sights, you know, they could see a picture that reminds them of something. You know, I don't know. Now, another idea that we could do, I'm kind of jumping around, but I did bring a little, it's more of a sensory basket, but we also like to call it a calm down basket. It has a lot of sensory objects in it, and it has a calm down bottle. If you guys all know how to make those now, it's just water, clear Elmer's glue, and glitter, and then you can hot glue the lid on, you can duct tape the lid on, whatever you need to do. What we explain to kiddos is that when they watch that bottle, that we understand that sometimes their brains feel like they're going crazy or like it's all messed up in there, or, you know, they have different words to describe it. So we have them shake the bottle up and watch the bottle and, you know, calm down, and it's supposed to have the same effect on them. Kathy has one on her phone.
It helps me.
An adult, calm down. You can have rules with your sensory basket too, you know, where it maybe to make it even more unique and special, they do get it when they're feeling upset, and you can see the first signs of anger. And you ask them if they would please go get their box out and choose something to play with. You know, if they're younger and you don't want them taking out 10 things and it's overstimulating, have them choose one. And then they have to put it back when they're calm and they feel better. So there are ways to put parameters even around your calm down basket or box and make it for what they want. I had some fidget spinners that I forgot to put in there, and those can, you know, whatever you need. Coloring is great. And I also was going to mention that the more you get to know your child, the more you understand things that make them happy. So you could make I call it a feel-good book, but it could be pictures of places they like, places they've been, places they want to go, people, animals, if they love race cars, you know, like whatever is like all positive things for them. And if you want to even cut them out of magazines or something, the way that I've always laminated, the cheapest, fastest, easy way, and it lasts forever, is clear contact paper. So you just buy a roll at Walmart, you know, and stick them all on there, and you fold it over and you cut them out, and they're good to go. So it could even be photographs that you can make a book out of, and they would never get ruined if they had the contact paper on them. So whatever, you know, whatever you think that they could put in the book. So back to the antecedents, identifying the triggers. Another way, if you notice it's a situation that always triggers them, sit down and think through that situation when you have time, and how could you do it differently. And we're going to go over that in a second because I have a case study. Because sometimes it's just the expectation of the situation that triggers them. And you still need the end result to happen, but you can maybe do it a different way. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And rewarding the smallest steps. That's super important and really hard when we are in the middle of crisis after crisis after crisis, and we just get burnt out and we think, oh, here we go again. You know, I mean, I'm trying to share thoughts I have as a parent of, you know, we're not making any progress. We've been trying so hard, and here we go again, you know. But if you guys can, you know, partner up and notice even the smallest thing. What if it's that you still had the explosion, you still had the meltdown, but they were able to calm themselves in 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes or 15 minutes. You know, you see the time shrinking. That's a big deal for them. That means that they're learning to regulate their feeling. And we always tell them that it is okay to be angry. We all feel anger. It is not okay, and then fill in blank, you know, to hit or to kick that toy or whatever the other thing was. So how can we express our anger differently? Because we want them to know that they're not bad for having anger. And usually there's something behind the anger. Now, biases and behaviors are things that the child brings with them. And it can be identified in the way they say things. So if they make comments and things, and again, this will be in our case study, so there's some great examples in there, but kids come with certain conclusions about life. They come with perceptions that they've made based on how they've been treated. So you have to try to figure out their biases and work with those. Remaining calm in an outburst. We really have to challenge ourselves constantly. And, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, I do great. And then there's that one time where I really am embarrassed about how I'm acting. So, but that's what parents do. And, you know, and so I think, you know, be aware of your voice. Be aware. We talk about be aware of our body language and our voice, but be aware of what you're saying and how you're saying it. You know, if you're being sarcastic, if there's a frustration coming out, or, you know, kind of an I'm so tired of this like attitude in the way you're speaking, they pick up on all those things. So try to be as neutral and positive as you can. Let's see, if they're younger kids and you notice they're not very verbal and they're not very expressive, you know, sometimes having them draw a picture about how they felt during their episode, their tantrum, their meltdown would be important. Sometimes if you give a child, when they're calmed down, something to do like Legos or coloring or something, they'll talk to you more because they're not, you know, it's not so intense. They're not focusing eye to eye contact, and they're going to just kind of go through the process with you, and it won't be as intimidating for them to tell you how they felt. And then C is the consequence. So trying to figure out how to praise them for their steps, their initial steps towards progress, avoiding any "I told you so" remarks, and I kind of covered that already. Consequences to see if they make things better or worse. So you can evaluate your parenting by, okay, we tried that consequence and it made it seem like it actually made things worse, and it made them not want to try as hard, and then so what can we do differently as a consequence? Debriefing with the child, I always suggest that we never try to debrief with a child until they are fully calm, until it's completely over. We could re-trigger them, we could re-escalate them, and if they went completely irrational, which we call more of a meltdown instead of just a temper tantrum, and we all can tell when they're irrational because they start to say really mean things or really ridiculous things, and they just don't really, well, they're just not rational anymore. And we know now that they really aren't in the rational part of the brain, they're in the primitive part of the brain. And so they aren't even making sense themselves. They don't feel right inside. And if you have a child explain that to you, some of them say, I feel crazy, I feel like things are all mixed up, those kind of things. So wait till they go completely back into their rational brain before you sit down and have a talk about it. And if they're a little bit older, you might give them space and say, when you're ready, we're going to talk about this. Sometime between now and when you go to bed, you let me know when you're ready. We have to talk about it, but I want you to let me know when you're ready. And I think the older ones really will. The younger ones may not. We may need to follow through with them. Don't take anything personally. We say that all the time. Parenting 101. That's really hard when they start saying personal things, but they don't really mean it. They're so angry that they're just going to throw anything out, and so try not to personalize it. Okay, so what I'd like to do is read through this case study, and it's not very long.